Hello, Milwaukee Bucks fans. Welcome back to another episode of Bucks Latest presented by Fan Arch. As always, I'm your host, Dean Simon. And before we get into everything, please make sure to leave a like, leave a comment down below, and also subscribe. We are still very much on the road to 1,000 subscribers. So if a few more of you could hit that big red button down below, I would greatly appreciate it. Also, turn on post notifications so you stay up to date with all the latest Milwaukee Bucks updates and the latest episodes. All right, now that the housekeeping stuff is out of the way, wanted to talk about the Bucks' first game of the 25-26 season on the schedule, which will be against the Washington Wizards. And then in the next segment, we'll talk about their second game of the season against the Toronto Raptors. But as for their first game of the coming season, I can't wait. I'm so looking forward to the beginning of the regular season. Of course, the preseason starts on October 4th, I believe. I think the Knicks are the first game of the preseason, but I just cannot wait until we are watching games that matter and we can really keep track of the record and all the crazy things that happen throughout the season. So, anyways, the Bucks and the Wizards. It's going to be a very interesting matchup just because the Washington Wizards are a young team brimming with talent and guys that are really trying to prove themselves, whether it's going from their rookie year to their sophomore campaign or second year guys trying to prove themselves as great third year guys. The amount of young talent on this team is actually preposterous with Alex Sarr and Bob Carrington and Keyshawn George and Trey Johnson and AJ Johnson and who am I getting? And Bilal Coulibaly. Of course, there was also Jordan Poole on this team last season, but then they shipped him away for CJ McCollum. But that's who did they get back in that transaction? They only got a guy back who's been averaging 20 plus for the last decade straight. So this first game of the season, it's probably going to be the most dangerous time to face the Washington Wizards out of any point in the season because CJ will probably be healthy, Chris Middleton will probably be healthy. All of these guys will be ready to go and ready to kind of prove people wrong, and that is if CJ and Chris Middleton aren't just kind of voluntarily sitting out of games as buyout candidates. But for this first game of the season, they'll likely be full go and they'll be ready to really contribute. But in terms of individual matchups, of course, you're going to have guys like Gary Trent Jr. and Kevin Porter Jr. trying to guard CJ McCollum in the open court and on the perimeter in the half court, and that's always been a difficult task for again the past decade. But in terms of their individual matchups, they're both players that size wise can match up with CJ pretty effectively. But the real interesting part of this first game will be how Alex Sarr and Myles Turner fare against each other in the front court. And Alex Sarr is just an incredible specimen. 7 foot. I feel like his height is not really counted accurately. I feel like he's more 7'1", 7'2", or at least that's what his height looked to be through the pre-draft process and things like that before he actually entered the NBA. But he's at least 7 feet tall, completely jacked, and so mobile and agile. And he does have a jump shot, though it did not go down consistently at all for him in his rookie season. But Alex Sarr is an incredible shot blocker and just defensive presence around the rim. So seeing him match up one on one with Myles Turner and of course with Giannis, that's probably going to be the most intriguing part about this game. And all the guys around the margins, like again, like a Bub Carrington and a Bilal Coulibaly, basically the Washington Wizards are a team where if you wake up on the wrong side of the bed, the Wizards could be coming for you and they could really make you look foolish on a night to night basis. Of course, we're talking about a team that was last in the conference, one of if not the worst team in the NBA. I think just behind maybe the Utah Jazz for the worst team in the NBA, in the bottom 10 or bottom 5 in most of the important categories that you could find. But going into this year, again, guys like Bilal Coulibaly will be looking to make a massive jump on both sides of the floor. We know how great of a defender he is, but he's going to probably be trying to leverage his athleticism more for the offensive end going into this next year. And then again, guys like Bub Carrington, who looked super impressive, guys like AJ Johnson, who really had his flashes for the Wizards, though did not really look to be as efficient of a scorer as he would have liked. All of these guys, it remains to be seen how well they can actually mesh together and if all of these young guys. Oh, and I didn't even mention Cam Whitmore coming from the Houston Rockets via trade. That is another young player that's going to be looking to get his shots up and really establish himself as a mainstay in the Wizards rotation. He's just going to be another guy that's jacking up shots. There's so many different avenues and ways this Wizards team can attack you. None of these guys are the most consistent scorers in the world or the greatest defenders in the world, but collectively, the Washington Wizards could surprise a lot of people going into this next year. And I'm really looking at this first matchup against the Milwaukee Bucks as a pretty decent test. And that's not to say the Wizards are going to be title contenders or anything, but it's a team brimming with young talent that they're going to be waiting anxiously to get out there on the floor for the first time and try and come out with an upset. So, really looking forward to that game and just, very excited for what's going to happen there. Going towards the second game of the season against the Toronto Raptors. Again, another super intriguing matchup just based on individual matchups as the Raptors completely reshaped their team this offseason. And they'll have Emmanuel Quickly, RJ Barrett, Brandon Ingram, Scotty Barnes, Jakob Pertl as their starting five. And guys like Grady Dick will be pushed to the bench, and they'll have other guys like Jamal Shed and Jonathan Mobo and Jacoby Walter and some other guys that I just can't think of right now that are really again going to be trying to prove themselves as clear cut difference makers in the Raptors rotation. And again, another team just based on talent alone that could really catch a Bucks team slipping, whether it's Brandon Ingram, former All-Star, Scotty Barnes, former All-Star, RJ Barrett, who had a fringe All-Star year this past year. Any one of those guys can just go off for 30 on any given night and really turn the tide of any given game. So that's just the main thing in terms of how the Raptors can attack the Bucks. But one thing about Milwaukee is that they'll have a guy in Gary Trent Jr. who will be coming out and looking for some sort of revenge against his former team, a team that he averaged 17, 18 points a game for and became or stayed as one of the most consistent three-point shooters in the entire NBA for, but then they kind of just let him go. They didn't really see him as a part of their future plans, even though he is still relatively young. They just did not really believe in him in that aspect, and they would rather have gone with guys like Grady Dick to develop and Emmanuel Quickly in a spot in Jamal Shed. So he's going to be coming into this game with at least a good amount of not necessarily pent up like anger or whatever. He's probably not really coming into this game with malice in mind, but he's going to want to prove his old team wrong and show them that they made a bad decision in just kind of letting him go for nothing. And now that he has the chance to really impact winning if things all go well for a Milwaukee Bucks team that has arguably a top 2 to 3 best player in the world on their roster. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Gary Trent Jr. comes into this game and whether he's going to be willing to just jack up shots as well. And again, just it's likely going to be in his head that this is a team that gave up on me. So really looking forward to how he attacks that matchup against the Raptors. So the next thing I wanted to talk about as we're kind of straying away from actual in-season matchups is that there's been an ongoing series of articles that's come out from the guys at Brew Hoop, and this one is from Zach Day, and they've been doing a continuous roster rank with each new guy that's ranking on the list in coming out in articles that are released intermittently. And Jericho Sims, it's not that I can't believe he was ranked this high, but I didn't expect to see Jericho Sims ranked at number 11 on the Milwaukee Bucks roster. Again, according to Zach Day from SB Nation's Brew Hoop. And he had some words about that specifically, and these are as follows. Looking ahead, Sims' role with the Bucks seems pretty clear. Play 10 to 15 minutes per night as the fourth big, focusing on defense, rebounding, and screening. He'll likely rack up a few DNP coaches' decisions, but will just as likely earn several spot starts, or at least more significant minutes when one of Giannis, Turner, or Portis inevitably misses time. And that couldn't be more of the truth. Jericho Sims looked extremely serviceable in the minutes that he got, though, obviously it was sparingly. So the actual prospect of Jericho Sims being one of the biggest contributors of in your front court for a team that doesn't necessarily have championship aspirations, but is a team that would like to make a conference finals run. That idea is, you could be pessimistic about Jericho Sims actually being this impactful for your team. But in terms of a pure talent standpoint and a potential standpoint, Jericho Sims as an athlete is absolutely unbelievable, and he can fill so many different roles and wear so many different hats for this Bucks team as a pretty decent shot blocker and incredible rebounder, again, just due to his leaping ability and his size and strength. And of course, a great screen setter, as was mentioned. And that'll really be the extent of what's expected of Jericho Sims. But I think it's pretty interesting that Jericho Sims ranked a good amount higher than guys like Amir Coffey and Gary Harris and some other guys that are going to be competing for spots in training camp. Though I do understand it because the need for a physical and also high flying center and shot blocking center to come off the bench, that that need is very visible and apparent, and Jericho Sims fits that mold pretty perfectly. So it's not hard to see them giving more minutes to Jericho Sims, but still, nonetheless, when he was with the Knicks, he was kind of viewed as an afterthought, more or less. And then now that he's with the Bucks and that he's really going to be relied upon for at least, again, 10, 12 minutes of solid basketball, that's an idea that some may stray away from. Though I am inclined to give Jericho Sims more of a shot, again, especially due to his just natural athletic gifts. He can offer a lot of different things to this Milwaukee Bucks team, and I'm really looking forward to it. And going into this last segment, we're going to just touch on Bobby Portis and his, not necessarily his likelihood of taking home the sixth man of the year, but just the fact that so many in the general NBA media and just NBA writers in general have begun to count out Bobby Portis for whatever reason, even though he's finished top two or three in sixth man of the year voting I think at least 2 of the past 3 years, and he's proved to be one of, if not the most consistent bench scorer in the entirety of the NBA. And it's not really a stretch to say that, again, in terms of bringing efficiency into the conversation. So an article came out from Fansided's Jordana Clark about this exact topic, and I thought some these words were pretty interesting. He's already been counted out next season for sixth man of the year, which is silly considering the reputation he's built in Milwaukee. The success of the Bucks may hinge on Giannis, but Portis is one of their most valuable players. His championship experience will hopefully come in handy for Milwaukee next season as the team seeks to break its streak of first round playoff exits. This also goes overlooked in general, that Bobby Portis truly is, and we saw this offseason really how much he possibly meant to even just bringing Giannis back. But just in terms of an on-court perspective, how much Bobby Portis means to this team and how often you look to Bobby Portis to get your offense or to get their offense settled down. And if you need a bucket, oftentimes you go to Bobby Portis. He's been, as I've used the word mainstay in a previous segment. He's been the mainstay of the Bucks bench rotation and the most solid and consistent glue piece of this bench rotation for the past couple of years, and of course since the championship run. And even as he starts to age a decent amount, we still see how valuable he is to the reserves, to the Bucks reserves to this day. And going forward, going into the 25-26 season, it's not going to be any different. So I really don't understand the reactions from several different outlets and places like ESPN ranking Bobby Portis around sixth or seventh in terms of guys that are most likely to make a run at the sixth man of the year. Bobby Portis is a consensus sixth man of the year candidate year in and year out, and I wouldn't really have an idea as to how it would be different this year. So going into this year, Bobby should have that in his head too. I hope that he's reading these kinds of things and seeing the kind of nonsense that's been put out on the internet with regards to his chance or his ability to secure that award. So again, been looking saying I'm looking forward to a lot of things from this episode, but maybe most of all, I'm seeing if Bobby Portis, again, with Damian Lillard now gone and you're missing 25 points and 7 assists, the offense has to come from somewhere. And not saying that Bobby Portis is going to take up all of the offensive production that Damian Lillard left behind him when he was waived and stretched. But now there's going to be more shots going in more places, and Bobby Portis will most likely look to establish himself as one of the Bucks' leaders in shot attempts this year. And with his efficiency in mind, not necessarily a bad thing. You'll want one of your best guys who is one of the best on your team at putting the ball in the basket to take more field goal attempts. And that's exactly what we're going to get from Bobby Portis in 25-26. But anyways, that'll be it for me today. Thank you very much for tuning into another episode of of Bucks Latest, presented by Fan Arch. Again, I've been Dean Simon, and make sure to leave a like, leave a comment down below, and subscribe. All right, I will see you guys in the next one. Go Bucks.